Welcome to Alyvix. This is an operations video that explains in detail how the timeout, break, and measure settings affect Alyvix's behavior and the output it produces in the console. Alyvix is designed to let you know when an application or website is not delivering the expected user experience. The two main metrics are availability and responsiveness. This video will show you how Alyvix determines and reports them in the console output. Alyvix Selector contains the settings that you can modify for each individual step in a test case. The parameters that can change either Alyvix's behavior or the output of a run are timeout, break, and measure. The timeout value is the number of seconds that Alyvix attempts to detect objects on screen. If this value is exceeded, then the break flag will determine what should happen next. The break flag tells Alyvix either to continue on to the next object if the timeout was exceeded, or else to stop the currently running script and switch instead to running the fail script. The measure flag doesn't affect Alyvix's behavior when running the test case, but simply tells Robot whether or not to output the measurement data of the current step in the console output. When a test case has completed execution, only test case objects whose measure flag is set will have their timing data included. The first situation happens whenever you need to load a new web page or view the results of a complex computation. Here you expect it will take some time for the results to be available, and if they don't appear, it won't make sense to continue. Knowing how long it takes to see the new page or view the computation results is the main reason you're monitoring. In the second case, you may need to add or change values in an interface that is already displayed, perhaps to set up an upcoming page load or computation. Here there's no need to worry about network latency or remote resources, so the timeout can be low and we don't need to see any measurements, but we should still fail if we can't change those values. Finally, we may need to optionally interact with the interface, like when there are cookie notices or pop-ups on a web page in some situations, or if we need to change the interface to make it more standardized, such as maximizing a window, which makes it easier to detect objects in specific locations. To illustrate these concepts, let's look at a simple example of navigating through an online tourism portal as if we were booking a hotel room. We'll begin by starting up Chrome in private mode and passing the URL to our booking site. Notice that when it starts, Chrome is not maximized. Next, we'll start Alyvix Editor and use the Add button to grab a screen capture of the first page of our web portal. Now we can show Alyvix two visual elements that indicate the window is not maximized. We'll use this test case object to maximize the screen. So we'll tell Alyvix to double-click on the title bar, which is to the left of the maximize icon. Since maximizing the screen is necessary, meaning that if it's not already maximized, then Alyvix has to do this step, then we're in case number 2. So we set a low timeout, leave the break flag set, and unset the measure flag. For the second half of this optional step, we can check if the window is already maximized. If it is, we don't need to run the previous step at all. We can also use this step to have Alyvix automatically start Chrome at the beginning of the test case. Now we're in the third case. We don't know how long it will take Chrome to load the initial web page, so we set a high timeout. But we unset the break flag so that our test case doesn't stop if it's not full screen. We can now combine these two steps into one by using the if-false scripting node, so we only maximize the window if we need to. Now we're ready to start navigating through the website, so we'll capture both an anchor point and the green button that we need to proceed. All we need to do here is tell Alyvix to click on the green button. This navigation step doesn't require a page load, it just causes the window to scroll down when it's clicked. So we're in the second case where we can use a low timeout. We do want to fail if this step doesn't work, but we don't need to report how long it takes. We'll now quickly add this step to the script and run it. Here's another navigation step that consists only of pressing a button to advance, this time to get to the booking form itself. So as before, we configure this step to find an anchor object and the button we want, and then click on that button. The button doesn't initiate a full page load with complex content, so it also doesn't require a high timeout value. Also, like the previous step, it's a necessary step but doesn't need to be measured, so again we're in case number 2. We've finally arrived at the booking form, so we're ready to fill in some values. This is a two-step process since we have to suggest a location and then wait for a pre-filled drop-down list. In this case, we find the correct field and enter the name of a destination. Yet again, this is a mostly local operation where we don't need to worry about how long it takes. So again, we set a low timeout, leave the break flag set, and unset the measure flag. When Alyvix types in our destination, the browser drop-down is ready for our next step. Now we're at the last preparation step before we query for results. We've entered our destination, but we need to select it from the drop-down so that the booking form will accept it. So we show Alyvix how to click on the drop-down and then how to click on the search button. By now you should be familiar with how case number 2 works, because this is the 5th time in a row that we've seen it. In fact, this pattern occurs frequently, whenever it takes multiple steps to set up the actual step you want to measure. It's also important to set the break flags for all of these steps because the measurement step that follows will give us meaningless data if any of these intermediate steps don't work properly. We're finally ready to measure the important data, how long the back-end server takes to generate the results of our booking request and display it. Unlike before, we don't need to interact with what we see on screen. Instead, we just check that the resulting page has the proper format. This step is a perfect example of case 1. A time-consuming process where if something goes wrong, the user will give up. So we set a high timeout and leave the break and measure flags set. Our last step is the best practice of cleaning up any resources we used, so that if we run this test case multiple times, we don't end up with multiple open instances of Chrome. We can do this by creating a step with no visual objects and using the root node to kill the running process. Then we switch to the exit script and add this step there, where it will automatically run when test case execution completes. We've now finished our test case, so we'll save it and test it before running it independently with Alyvix Robot. Now we can watch as Alyvix Robot runs our entire test case all in one go. We can see each of the steps that we created, from starting Chrome, maximizing the window and loading the website, to navigating to the search form, to filling in the destination, to sending the search results, and finally to checking that the results are well formed. When Robot is done, it closes Chrome and we see the timing results in the command prompt, just for the one step where we set the measure flag. Changing the timeout, break, and measure settings allow you to change how Alyvix Robot behaves when running test cases, and to choose what measurements will appear in the console output. You can see that since the final check step was the only measure flag set, it's the only single-step measurement that appears in the command prompt. You can use the combinations of settings we've presented in this video when creating your own test cases by looking at whether each step is optional, transitional, or delivers crucial results. Thanks for watching this Alyvix video tutorial. Be sure to check out the Alyvix website, blog, and user guide at these links.